This is my attempt to update a concept that I really enjoyed but felt was incomplete. Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. I'm going to go through some of the high points and then expand what I perceive to be some missing pieces. She's attempting to make a differentiation between the idea of us taking action for someone else's benefit and taking action for our own benefit in a way that affects someone else. Her claim is that we are most comfortable giving a gift or taking care of our partner. So we give our partner something which they receive, and in that interaction, we are doing something for their benefit. A classic example of that will be giving a massage, and her claim is we're more comfortable with that versus taking. In a taking dynamic, we are doing something to our partner that is for our own benefit. Our partner allows us, she uses the word allow, or provides us with access to their body, to their attention, to whatever it is that we need in order to take that action or to take that benefit from them. So the contrast to a massage would be something like feeling our partner up, where we are enjoying the feel of their body. Another example that's very relevant to me is I like to talk a lot. I like to tell my partner what I've learned, what I've enjoyed, and it is for my benefit because I like sharing that. My partner can provide me with attention, can provide me with access to them as an enthusiastic listener, and that is another manifestation of a similar taking dynamic. Betty Martin makes the claim that many people aren't comfortable with taking and only know how to give. Because they only perceive giving to be an option, they actually think that doing and benefit are on the same axis, when in fact doing is orthogonal to who is benefiting. It's on a different axis. I can do something that I benefit from, or I can do something my partner benefits from, or vice versa. They can do something to me that is for their benefit, or they can do something to me that is for my benefit. She does make the claim, and I think it's true, that giving is also something more familiar because it's allowable in multiple contexts, whereas taking is something that is fairly exclusively reserved for very intimate relationships. She goes so far as to, in fact, call taking the lover's touch. She focuses heavily on touch. I think there are other manifestations, but I think she is correct that taking is a much more intimate act, and there is something of integrity in owning our desires. In asking to take from our partner, we have to be very honest about who is benefiting. We have to say that I want to benefit from feeling your body up. By contrast, there's a disingenuousness if I don't know how to take and I insist on trying to disguise my taking in the form of giving by offering my partner a massage in which I'm really trying to feel her up or enjoy her body. That disingenuousness starts to poison the interaction. She talks about things that are intimate in that context, such as play or eroticism, whereas giving is more in the realm of closeness, as defined by the authors of The Art of Intimacy. Closeness is more about taking care of the other, subverting your own desires for the sake of another person, and it can be an incredibly joyful experience. And that is something that she emphasized. Each of these quadrants has its own experience of joy. Giving can be incredibly rewarding. Receiving, of course, something from your partner can also be very pleasurable, very enjoyable. Taking something from your partner can be very enjoyable, and providing or allowing your partner to take from you can also be very enjoyable. And each of those carries with it its own type of joy, its own type of pleasure. The reason she calls it the Wheel of Consent is this big circle on the outside. She makes a point of saying that all these dynamics that she's discussing are happening within a circle of consent. And each of them, if taken outside the circle of consent, becomes a very poisonous thing. The clearest example of that is with taking. Within consent, if my partner consents to me taking from them, that can be a very joyful experience for both of us. If, on the other hand, I'm outside the circle of consent and she has not agreed to allow me to take from her, that's something more like rape or assault. The same can be true of giving, however, which we tend to consider universally good. Whereas we all know that giving creates a sense of reciprocity in other human beings. And so if we give them something they have not consented to receive, we are playing manipulatively on their sense of obligation. And that's been used by con artists for generations. So the other critique of her original formulation is her conception of how consent is established. For her, it relies on explicit verbal establishment of a frame. I think that's a narrow viewpoint that doesn't account for a lot of nuance. In long-term relationships, many things we do are based on consent that is implied, assumed, understood from the context of the relationship. And I think more importantly, it's not entirely clear that the benefit is unilateral, or even that the doing is unilateral. I might want to kiss my partner, and rather than establishing a frame explicitly and verbally, I might give her a look or lean in toward her. I am perhaps doing more than she is, but hopefully she kisses me back. I may be taking more action, and then doing may be slanted, but this line is more representative of what's really happening than just drawing a point here and saying, well, I'm doing it. Similarly, I may certainly enjoy kissing her, but there's nothing to say that she's not enjoying it just as much or even more. So again, just having a point that says, well, I asked if she would let me kiss her, and therefore I'm taking because I'm doing it for my benefit, that's an unnecessarily restrictive view. I think a better view is something like a box. Maybe I'm doing more than she's doing, and maybe we're both benefiting the same amount, and so in that interaction, we're drawing a box that's somewhat like this. And this box describes the interaction where there's a great deal of taking, some giving, and she's providing and receiving a little bit. But there's a little bit of both going on, and that may describe the interaction of it a bit better. What's important is an honest appraisal and an honest framing of what is happening. And I mentioned that before, there's a certain amount of integrity and owning our desires and in owning our benefit. If this interaction happens and I lean in for a kiss and she goes for it and we make out, and then maybe later on we're having an argument and she says, well, you're always kissing me and interrupting what I'm doing and forcing your kisses on me, she is negating her side of the benefit and negating her side of the action. And so she's cutting out this quadrant and really framing the event as being a pure taking event, which is a reframing of what actually happened in the moment. Those reframings can be very painful, and there's a lack of honesty that happens there in the middle of an argument. The other thing I think she missed, and this is where my expansion really comes from, is that even if I am taking, it does not mean that I am necessarily initiating. Similarly, just because I'm giving doesn't mean I'm initiating. She frames both in the context that the giver is the initiator and the taker is the initiator, but it could easily not be the case. If my partner asks me to give her a massage, so I'm giving and she's receiving, but the initiative was hers. Betty Martin's framework doesn't quite have a great setup for analyzing that. And that's when I realized that this concept of initiation and motivation was missing from her framing and actually formed another axis of analysis. It actually formed another way of examining the issues, and in particular, I think it creates a way of analyzing the energy flow in relationships, because motivational energy, the energy of initiating, can be significant, and we come to feel a sense of unfairness if we are the only ones putting in that initiative energy. So I created another axis by which to analyze what was happening. Here, on this axis, if I initiate, then I am motivating my partner, and my partner will ideally, within the frame of consent, meaning I'm not motivating them against their will or overriding their will, they're actually accepting my motivation. And so here, if I'm the one motivating the action, meaning I ask my partner if I can feel her up, or I ask my partner if I can give her a massage, then I am doing the action, and I'm also motivating the action. And that to me is something like initiation. When I initiate, when she accepts the motivation and she accepts being done to, she agrees to participate. So I initiate and she participates. By contrast, if I am the one doing something, but in fact she is the one motivating and I am accepting her motivation, so she encouraged me to give her a massage, and I undertook to give her a massage when I consented. And this is benefit neutral. So I could initiate something that's for my benefit. I can initiate something that's for her benefit. I could encourage her to do something that is for her benefit, or I could encourage her to do something that is for my benefit. And so this axis of motivation is actually independent of the axis of benefit. And again, there's pleasure in all of these experiences. And that's just as true here as it was in Betty Martin's original vision, that the person accepting motivation, or the person who is accepting action, is not tolerating, they're not subjugating, they're not suffering, they're not giving up anything. These are framed as consensual in the best possible way, meaning enthusiastically consented. Now that we've created this idea, we can obviously see if we have three axes, then we have a third way of viewing all of this. So we originally had a sense that was doing and benefit, and then we had doing and motivation, and now we have benefit and motivation. I can motivate her to let me do something, but I am coaching her, and she would strive to either allow or she would strive to do, but that is the engagement. That is the dynamic that we're entering when I am motivating something to happen that is for her benefit. By contrast, if I'm motivating something that is for my own benefit, then I'm doing something like advocating, and she is responding. Each of these dynamics provides its own emotional experience, and they feel different. So the experience of taking from my partner is different than the experience of giving to my partner. The experience of initiating with my partner is different than the experience of encouraging my partner. And the experience of coaching my partner is different than the experience of advocating for something with my partner. And each one can be joyful, as I've said before, but each one also feels different. It's a different experience emotionally in your skin. And so likewise, just as we described before, if I am purely initiating and purely doing, then I would be in this box. But again, it's usually more mixed. We can draw those boxes again like this, where maybe I'm doing more and she's doing less, and I'm motivating her more and her internal motivation is less, but it's not necessarily the same as if it's just in this quadrant, which can also happen and can be a perfectly acceptable experience as well, but it is different. And so each shade of this box moving around the quadrants produces a different experience. So as I was exploring this, the next idea came into my head. What about combining all three of these axes? What I found is that rather than experiencing a particular feeling or emotion, when we consider all three axes, we are inhabiting a role, a particular energetic role in regard to our partner. Consider the situation in which I am doing something and I am motivating it, and it is for my own benefit. It would be here on the far side behind there, but I would be inhabiting that space. And in that space, I'm occupying the role of something like ravishment, where I am motivating myself to do something that is for my own benefit to my partner. If my partner is motivating me and I accept her motivation for me to do something that is for my own benefit, then I'm in this space here. And that is a very different feeling. It's a different role. In that situation, I'm playing the role of the supported victor or the star quarterback, and she's playing the role of the cheerleader. There's an interaction between our roles. She's down here in this quadrant and I'm up here in this quadrant, and that interaction creates a dynamic role play when we inhabit those spaces on all three axes. And that's the extension of her idea. She frames the two-dimensional view of exchanging different emotions, different feelings, where I am taking and my partner is providing, and that is our interaction. Whereas in my larger framework here, there's something more like complementary roles. She's playing the cheerleader and I'm playing the supported victor, or I'm playing the enthusiastic ravisher and she's the enthralled captive. I spelled out 8 different roles, one for each of these spaces. We've already talked about several of these, but we'll go through them one by one. If she is motivating me and I accept her motivation to take action that is for my own benefit, then she's playing the role of the cheerleader. I'm the supported victor. If, on the other hand, I'm motivating the action, but I'm motivating her to do something that is for my benefit, then that's something like the Lord of the Manor, where I'm commanding her and she is playing the role of the servant, fulfilling my command. And these roles, again, each have their own energy. Now, I've chosen names here that imply a power dynamic. The ideas that I've expressed, Lord of the Manor and servant, command and obey, and those kinds of things imply a power dynamic. And so the interesting thing is that if you flip the power dynamic, but you maintain the energy dynamic, then instead of the Lord of the Manor and the servant, you get something more like the brat and the daddy. Instead of the caretaker and caretakee, you get something more like the helper and the beneficiary. And instead of the ravisher and the enthralled captive, you get something more like the infectiously excited little girl and the captivated observer. And so the naming and the feeling might be different based on the power dynamic role that is being inhabited. But the energy role is still the same, and the contribution to the relationship is still the same, regardless of the power dynamic that affects some of the naming. And I've changed the naming here a little bit just to kind of capture some of those flavors. One of the things that maintains the power roles, even in the different energy roles, is the method of initiation. The Lord of the Manor initiates by commanding the servant. The brat initiates by teasing her dominant. If the brat really wants a spanking, then she can initiate that for her own benefit, that's what she wants, by teasing or misbehaving her daddy, who indulges her and plays along with the game that she has initiated. That's different than the Lord of the Manor commanding the servant, but in both cases, one person initiated something that the other person had to do for the first person's benefit. If my submissive comes to me and asks me, please, daddy, I would like to be flogged tonight, and I do it, then she has initiated. And that's not really bratty, that's a different, respectful initiation, but I couldn't get a name that captured all the different flavors. So the intention there is just capturing the notion that she initiated something that she wanted me to do that was for her, and yet she still remained in a submissive position because she initiated in a submissive way by asking permission, or in the case of the brat, by misbehaving. I actually don't engage in brat play. I think that violates the power role emotionally for me, and so it feels like an attempt at dominance, even though it can be playful for many people. It's not for me. It's not a way that I enjoy playing, because specifically it feels like an attempt to violate the power dynamic role in order to achieve the change in energy role. However, the notion of my partner asking permission, asking for something, is very erotic to me, very exciting for me, whether that's sexual or not, where she can come and say, daddy, can you help me with this? Can you do this for me? So one last note, just as before on the two-dimensional grid, we could describe an action with a box instead of just with a dot. On the three-dimensional grid, we can actually talk about describing a cube instead of just a single point. And what that means is I may be playing a combined role. I may be playing the daddy and the supported victor because it may be for her benefit, but it may also be for my benefit. So you don't have to be playing a single role at a single time. And just as before, each of those shades of combined roles will feel different to inhabit, and the energy flow will be mixed differently.